Long before condoms, birth control pills, or modern medicine, people were already trying to answer one very practical question: how do you prevent pregnancy? And some of their answers were surprisingly creative. Ancient medical texts describe mixtures made from honey, plant fibers, tree resin, oils, and herbs. Other cultures experimented with animal membranes, withdrawal, and methods based on fertility timing. But here is the important part. Some of these ideas may have offered limited protection, many probably did nothing, and a few were genuinely dangerous. So let us travel back in time and see what people actually tried. Our first stop is ancient Egypt. The Kahun Gynecological Papyrus, written around 1800 BCE, is one of the oldest surviving medical texts dealing with women's health. Later Egyptian texts, including the Ebers Papyrus, also contain recipes intended to prevent conception. One method involved placing a mixture of honey, acacia, and plant fiber inside the vagina. The logic was not completely random. The fiber could have acted as a crude physical barrier, while the sticky honey helped keep it in place. Some modern writers have suggested that fermented acacia might also create an acidic environment that reduces sperm movement, although we cannot know how effective the original preparation really was. You may also have heard the famous claim that Egyptian women used crocodile dung. Some historical accounts do describe contraceptive mixtures containing animal excrement, but the exact translation and identity of the ingredient are debated. Either way, this would have carried an obvious risk of infection and should never be romanticized as lost medical wisdom. Next, we move to ancient Greece and Rome. Greek and Roman physicians wrote about plants, vaginal preparations, withdrawal, and attempts to predict when pregnancy was most likely. The problem was that ancient doctors did not fully understand ovulation, and they often failed to distinguish between contraception, emergency methods, and substances intended to end an early pregnancy. One plant became especially famous: silphium. Silphium was so valuable in the ancient Mediterranean that it appeared on coins from the Greek city of Cyrene. Ancient writers connected it with medicine, sexuality, and fertility control. But the plant eventually disappeared, and historians still debate whether it was an effective contraceptive, an abortifacient, or simply an expensive herbal remedy surrounded by an excellent reputation. In other words, silphium may be history's most famous birth control mystery. What about condoms? There are reports of sheath-like barriers in ancient Egypt, Greece, and Rome. These may have been made from linen, animal bladder, or intestine. However, the evidence is uneven, and some stories come from mythology or much later retellings. Physical archaeological evidence becomes much clearer in early modern Europe. Condoms made from animal intestine were used before latex existed, especially to reduce the risk of sexually transmitted infections. They were expensive, sometimes reused, and nowhere near as reliable as a modern condom. Across the medieval Islamic world, physicians also described barrier preparations, withdrawal, and substances placed near the cervix. These writings show that reproductive knowledge did not simply disappear after the ancient world. It continued to develop, move between cultures, and change over time. But there was a darker side to historical birth control. Plants such as rue and pennyroyal were repeatedly associated with fertility control. The difference between a contraceptive dose and a poisonous dose could be dangerously small. People suffered organ damage, severe bleeding, and death from remedies that were passed down as traditional knowledge. That is why ancient does not mean safe, natural does not mean harmless, and traditional does not mean effective. So, which part surprised you most? The Egyptian honey mixture, the mystery of silphium, or the animal intestine condom?